Is everybody excited? Is everybody ready for another round of Q&As? Hello everybody, this is My Profile is Great. I am recording in the middle of the night right now. Hopefully not... Damn it, where did I put the paper? Here it is. Hopefully I'm not waking anybody up, but you know, I don't really care at this point. Ha ha ha, I need to record videos. So, because I didn't really have any Q&A questions from the last round, I probably should have specified to ask more questions from people, send some questions in the comments below or whatever. So I ended up having to hit up the usual sources of PrimeSonic and Matt, because you know, I love those guys, and I know that if I need questions, they will eventually send them my way. And I was in desperate need of questions this time because I'm trying to kind of keep the Q&A every week. It sounds really weird and it sounds really anal, but I'm like, I really want to keep this up and have a make a habit out of it. Make a habit out of the Q&A. And so, let's start off with some questions from PrimeSonic. What is your earliest memory with the internet? This is a really weird one because we got the internet in my family fairly early. I think I was maybe 5 or 6. So I was practically born with the internet, understanding how it works and all the different elements of it. I remember one of the big things was the Cartoon Network website at that point, because we all had Cartoon Network. It was amazing. I love that station. I love the programming that they played. Space Ghost Coast to Coast had just come out, and that was sort of something that was sort of adult themed, so my dad watched it, but it wasn't so inappropriate that I couldn't watch it myself. And I remember on the website, they had little animated GIFs of the praying mantis character. I don't really remember his name, the guy who was always on the keyboard, and a Space Ghost himself. And this was back in the point where all these websites were really crappy. I remember web designs were not a huge thing back then. You go onto any website now and it's something that any sort of person who's well versed in HTML could just vomit out in 5 minutes. And that's what the Cartoon Network website looked like really bad Flash GIFs, and it was a big old mess. And I just remember the internet, you know, it was messy like that. I love the early days of when you had AOL Kids. I remember when my parents installed that whole thing, and then they realized, wait a minute, so you're not allowed to search at all. You're just going to be stuck within the pre-registered links of AOL Kids. And they eventually kind of went, you know what, we're going to trust you with the search engine. And that was really, you know, at age 8 or 9, that's a pretty big kind of heft to put on a kid, to sort of say, hey, we're going to trust you to be looking in the right places. And I was a really good kid with the internet. I did not abuse its powers at all until I was much older. So those were I have very nostalgic feelings toward it, really, when I think about it. Maybe that's why I'm such an internet addict now, because it had kind of installed itself into my brain at a very early age, and I had sort of taught myself to be reliant on it for information. So now I think about it, and it's can I really survive without the internet? I really don't know. That would be an interesting test to put myself through. Oh God, I don't want to do that though. Please, please don't make me do that. Don't take my internet away, God, and people listening to me. Was there a particular work of fiction that helped you explore and define who you are today? Star Wars. That is the work of fiction as a kid that I remember that really dug into me and made me think about different sorts of concepts. You know, it wasn't just the laser beams and the X-Wings and the space battles and all that. I related to Luke Skywalker and his journey. I think every kid, you know, at that particular point in time wanted to be Luke Skywalker. He's the perfect, you know, farm boy. He's moral. He always tries to do what's right. Maybe he's a little bit cocky and arrogant as far as the ways of the world are concerned, but that's all youth. We all think that we are just all this great shit and everything until we get out there and face Darth Vader, and then we go, oh, we've been tempted by the dark side way too much. And that's what I think is interesting about Luke, is that you look at his arc, and there is a point, I feel like they could have explored this more with Return of the Jedi, but there is that point where he's tempted by the horrible forces around him, and he sort of turns around and goes, you know what? Forget this. I am a Jedi Knight, and I'm going to stand by what I think is right, even if you're going to electrocute me to death. And that's a really powerful image as a kid. Like that scene where Luke's being electrocuted, that hit me. Because I'm like, wow, this is a real hero. Because any other lesser person, if put between a situation of life and death, and not just life and death, but life and torture, he is slowly being killed and zapped of his life. I think a lot of people would have went like, you know what, maybe I should go along with this whole emperor empire thing for a while and see where that gets me. But no, Luke is a man who sticks by his principles, and thus he's a really good role model. As far as role models for kids today, as far as like people that really influence them, I've got to say, Katniss from The Hunger Games as a female character, I think is a really good role model for young women, especially when you compare her to some other like teen novels and teen movies that have been out recently. She isn't really somebody who's forced too much into becoming obsessed with a guy figure and having to sort of be ruled under his thumb. She's very independent. She's very powerful. She's, again, much like Luke Skywalker, she has this moral code that she sticks to. She is the one who offers herself up as tribute as her sister is being put into the games. And that's one of the best scenes in the film, if anybody's seen it, is when she runs up. And you immediately like her from that point. And she, you know, she makes some mistakes. She manipulates the system a bit. I think you could argue that while she's in the game, her relationship with the pita bread character, I like putting bread at the end of that because it's clever. That whole thing, you could kind of see it as her possibly manipulating him a bit. It goes a little bit more in depth in the book as far as like what she's thinking, and she's very confused about what she feels. But yeah, that's one, definitely. I can't really think of a lot of great role models, because most of the time in fiction you have to have a really flawed character in order for anything to be interesting, and they sort of go through an arc and they become like a great person or a decent person by the end. So a lot of people that I would say influenced me are mostly the really flawed ones. Like I would say Ed Wood from the Tim Burton movie is definitely somebody who would influence me, like as a teenager and as an adult, watching that movie. Even though he's this horribly flawed character, like he doesn't seem to really grasp reality at all. He just keeps on, he's a film director, and he just keeps on making these movies that are really terrible. And he won't take really anybody's advice as far as how to improve them or how to make them better. He just keeps on making crap. But he's kind of proud and invigorated about it. I'm not sure about the actual Ed Wood as a person, because, you know, I haven't really read up all that much about him. I've never actually talked to him, so I can't really say about the individual himself. But from the character from the film, hell yeah, his optimism about just making pure shit, that is something that I constantly bring up in my mind when I'm writing something or when I'm blogging or doing anything that's creative. You have to enjoy the process, and in the end, when you think about it, the final product is important. Like, I don't want to scratch that out, but it's more about the journey to that product that makes the artist, I think. And that's why I love Ed Wood. He's probably my adult influence more than anything else, other than Kermit the Frog. Because Kermit the Frog is always the man of the hour. He's a bit of a jerk, though, so I'm not really sure I would count him as that great of a role model. He's cool, though. What fictional character do you... Oh, I already did that one. What is the most uncomfortable, controversial question you could be asked that you would refuse to talk about? Yeesh. Could we ask it anyways? I really don't like talking about abortion. If somebody were to ask me what my stance was on the issue, like during a Q&A session, I would probably have to say, I really don't know. I don't feel like I'm educated enough to like make a proper decision about that kind of thing. Could you ask me like controversial questions and I'll possibly answer it? It depends on whether it's classy or not. Like if you do ask me something that's just outright offensive, like I'm probably just going to skim over it and not really give it much clarity. But if you do ask a question that's about a particular issue in, today's society or in past society or whatever, and you ask it in a way that's thoughtful, that's going to start a discussion as opposed to just kind of backing me into a corner about something, hell yeah, I'll talk about it. I'll say that I don't know enough and I don't like to make a final decision because I'm indecisive like that. I really am. I don't really like to put my foot down on a lot of things unless I'm absolutely sure of what I feel about something. So that's why with abortion, I'm kind of in the middle. It makes me feel uneasy, but then I can understand why people would actually go through with it. Same thing with a lot of those kinds of issues. I can see both sides. Like, if it's something like gay marriage, I can't really see both sides on that one. I'm completely for, the gays should be getting married, I'm for that. They're individuals too, just like anybody else, and they deserve to be given the same rights as everybody else. So in that particular case, I would give a stance. But most of the time, we'll see. Ask some and see where that gets us. All right, Mattman, he had some questions here. American game developers versus Japanese game developers. Ooh, this is one that might get me in a little bit of a pickle of controversy, because I know that a lot of my subscribers are mostly people who subscribe to me for my anime stuff. I mean, even looking through my list of subscribers, you'll notice that a lot of the picks are anime picks and stuff. I actually recently have found that I prefer American game developers for the most part. Recently, in the past, I was a huge fan of Square Enix, of Level 5, and all those developers and the games that they made. There was nothing American that I felt matched up to the quality of something like Final Fantasy X or the Kingdom Hearts games, or pretty much anything Square Enix made during my young adult years. Those were the things that really caught my attention, that kept me going as far as gaming is concerned. Now, it's much more BioWare and the sorts of games where you get to make multiple choices and find overarching stories and be able to affect the outcome of things. You don't really see that a whole lot in a lot of Japanese RPGs that I've played. I realize that there are some where you can obviously do that. Obviously visual novels and those sorts of things. But as far as the things that I'm actually interested in, like the actual JRPGs, they feel too linear for me now. I just can't really get my head around them. I would much rather watch, a really good anime than play your average JRPG that's popping out, because that's all they really feel like to me. They feel like really long anime stretched out over a game system. There's a lot of exceptions. There's Persona, obviously, Persona 3 and 4. I adore them very deeply. They're fantastic games. I gotta go with the American game developers, though, because I found that most of the games that I play come from American game developers. Even stuff like, you look at the best stuff that's been coming out of Nintendo recently, that's Retro Studios, like Donkey Kong Country Returns, like the Metroid Prime games. That is a developer that is basically, if I remember right, they're housed in Texas. So those aren't even really Japanese games. When you start to see a pattern where Japanese game developers are sort of charting things off to America to develop for their licenses, you start to wonder if, there's some kind of epidemic over there where the creativity has just kind of drained. We'll see, though. Things go up and down in the industry, so I'm sure in another few years, you're going to see a sudden surge in amazing Japanese video games. I have no doubt about it whatsoever. All right. What's your opinion on DLC? I hate DLC. I'll be honest, I find nothing more annoying than sort of buying a game and seeing that there's a whole nother storyline to the game that you can't get unless you pay an extra $3 or $4. That to me is very, very annoying. I can understand the angle of DLC if it's several months after the game had initially been released, or a year after the game had been released, and you're adding on to the story, it's another section to the plot, then I think it's appropriate. When it's something like little costumes and things, I just kind of feel like you're milking the gamer for all that they're worth, and I I think that's such a cheap tactic. These are all things that should already be packaged with the game. If it's something that you've already developed and you release the game and you have all this little extra stuff that costs money, that drives me crazy. It's not like we're buying a free-to-play game. The game's $60 when you buy it initially. That pisses me off. So I've got mixed feelings. I mostly do not like DLC, and I feel like it's just another one of those Walmart gimmicks. Is multiplayer a necessary component of modern gaming? No, of course it isn't. We have so many single-player experiences that are fantastic, that work on their own. Multiplayer games, you know, they're great for what they are. They're multiplayer games. It's a completely different breed of gaming. If you have a great single-player game and you have great multiplayer on top of that, that's fantastic. That's another added cherry on top of that tree. Now, if you have something that's a single-player game all by itself and it's fantastic, then there's no need for there to be multiplayer at all. It would just be an added bonus. So no, it is not a necessary component of modern gaming. I think that a lot of people prefer playing multiplayer games, and I think there's probably a bigger market for that sort of thing. But you know, you can have all kinds of different experiences in gaming. There's no reason to kind of just say, this is what this game needs, because everybody else is doing that. No, that's bullshit. Alright, here's the final question. I really shouldn't have saved this for last, because why do bitches hate bitches? You know what, I'm not even going to give that a response because it's silly. Alright, everybody, this is My Profile is Great, and I am signing out. I hope that you all enjoyed my questiones, my answers, and oh my god, I got water on my phone.